Hi guys, welcome back to the Earthly Delights podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the use of the smartphone and everything that goes with that, how we're potentially different human beings from our parents, and what are we willing to sacrifice in order to get our lives back on track in regards to the smartphone and social media. But before we get into any of that, we're going to start off with what's the crack. So, Jim, what is the crack?
What's the crack, man? Things are good. I came home to Dublin last week, on Thursday, so 2 days ago. Unfortunately, a close friend of mine, his dad passed away, and so obviously I'm coming home on sad circumstances. But I guess it's also good to see my friend, good to be here for him, and good to be with family also.
Yeah, how for you, man? How was that? Because obviously, like you told me over WhatsApp and stuff before the podcast, and I didn't want to say anything to you over the podcast because sorry, over WhatsApp, because I knew you were trying to support your friend and do the best by him. But in terms of you, like I was the first thing that sprung to mind was, oh man, I wonder if that brings back any memories for you. You know, like a parent dying in kind of unforeseen circumstances at a young age. Like, did that bring back anything? It must have done,
Yeah,
surely.
it's exactly what happens, man. I remember like 18 months ago, a good friend of mine, her mom passed away, and I went to her funeral, and it was just the exact same, man. I was like putting myself in her shoes, and I was like, oh my god, I know exactly what she's going through, and I just feel so helpless. Like, what can I do? Because I knew, yeah, I knew the position so well. I knew what she was thinking. I knew how numb she feels, and how everybody's coming up to you, and you just have to say thanks, or like thanks for coming, and you don't even know what to say. You kind of just want to, you're struggling to process it, because in Ireland as well, it happens so quickly from when the person dies to when you're expected to have the funeral, and then everyone's in your face, and then probably 5 6 days later it's just like you're alone, and it's, yeah, it's such a difficult, basically when this happens I immediately it's not so much, the memories. Yeah, it's the memories, but it's more just I'm putting myself in their shoes. Like, I know exactly. I know how it feels. Like, I know
Yeah, and you know what's in store for them as well.
pretty
It's
much, man.
not just how they feel now, but you kind of know what's coming, in the long term. Whereas I would have no idea if I was trying to support a friend or if it had happened to me.
Absolutely. Like that's what me and my dad were saying even yesterday to my friend. Where post funeral, or just at the funeral, everyone's giving you the condolences, and it's all usually well intentioned, but it's 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 the weeks after, and it's the months after, that you really need support, because otherwise,
How's it been kind of coming back home in those circumstances? Because you had the holiday, well not holiday, but the trip back home pre-booked anyway, didn't you? Like you were going to come back next weekend, wasn't it?
I was gonna come back next week because I have an interview. Yeah. So I guess it just means I'm gonna be home for a few more days, which is nice. Yeah, which is nice. I mean, I don't know. More and more I come back to Dublin, and it doesn't really feel like my city. Um, and yeah, so yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's nice to be around the accent that you know, and the humor that you know, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's more just the people in my life that's important, and then the city, particularly, man. Like, Dublin's going through some difficult circumstances right now, so it's not the best place to be right now. No.
Right, I've got you. And I'm guessing that now, after what's happened with your mate and stuff, like you'll probably be seeing a lot of your. If you weren't anyway, you were going to see a lot of your friends because those kind of events bring people a lot closer than even just the extended groups and everyone kind of rallies together, don't they?
For sure, man. Right. Even I was talking to my friend yesterday, and my friend was telling me how yesterday he just realized how much he loved my friend whose dad passed away. He might not have really thought about it or put it into words beforehand, but just seeing his friend, our friend, in that circumstance, and him just feeling all these emotions, he's like, "Geez, man, I love him so much." And it's usually only these like extreme circumstances that can remind people, or like evoke this in people. I mean, some people can have the ability to really connect without like tragic circumstance, but a lot of people who are you know, yeah, I mean, a lot of us aren't really told or encouraged to express. You just even to tell your friends that you love them. Like, how rare is that? I mean, how many times do your friends tell you love them straight away? And I'm trying to do that more often. And yeah, it was nice to hear my friends say that as well. So obviously, it's funerals are,
Fucking terrible.
you
That's
know,
what they fucking are.
yeah,
There's no other word.
but like there can be um light coming out of the funeral. You know, there can be positives. Then, and I actually am really confident that the friends will become closer with, which again is something to take from it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think like you're saying how your friend now realizes how much like he loves his mate and whatever else, and you were saying that it's kind of these extreme circumstances that kind of make you reflect. I also think there's twofold to that. One, because we take our friends and our loved ones for granted, and you kind of never think that it's going to happen to you. You know, you always hear of people dying suddenly or whatever it may be. In fact, in Lincoln, which is like my hometown, there I didn't know the girl, but there was a girl who she was in Australia on holiday, and she like climbed to this. I think it's like a well-known cliff in Australia where you can get like really nice views, and she was trying to take a selfie and slipped or fell and basically just fell off the cliff and like kind of fell to her life's end. And that made Lincoln as a city kind of rally round because Lincoln's so small, so everyone kind of, if you didn't know her, you knew someone who knew her. But I was thinking, I was like, oh man, that's such a shame. Obviously, I didn't know the girl, but then I was thinking, you can't. There's a part of you that takes your friends for granted, of course, and maybe we should be more aware that this can happen to anyone. That death doesn't. It takes no prisoners. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't pick and choose. It just is. That's just how it is. But also, I think you can't live your life like that either because you would just live your life in a constant state of panic. You know, it's getting that fine balance between not taking your friends for granted and not thinking that death will never touch them to then going and being like, oh my god, all of my friends could die at any moment. I must make sure that we cherish every single moment because we never know when the last one is. Because whilst that sounds good, I don't think practically that's probably the most sane way to live. You know, I think that would drive me absolutely insane.
I know what you mean, but I think you could definitely find a way of basically not having anything, or not having anything left unsaid. You don't like just, oh yeah, I always wanted to say this to him, or there's, it just takes a bit of courage just to say, oh yeah, like it's important that I tell him this. And maybe we do it sometimes when it's like me and you are going back to wherever we're going and we might not see our friends for a few months. We might say something like, yeah, I just want to let you know. But if we just say this to, the auntie that we don't see that often but has always meant a lot to us, or the cousin or the friend that we don't get to see that often but we do really appreciate their, like those words, man, like, even though I do think, actions speak louder than words, and what you do for that person, it can be a lot more profound than what you say to them. It really does help, man. Even like me and you were saying about the words that we heard from people listening to the podcast, like it can help a lot. A lot of people, because it's so rare, that people say really kind and genuine things, open things, vulnerable things to people, that when they do, it picks you up. Like we were saying, we were on a high for a few days.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say that in my like part of what's the crack, which I guess kind of leads on to it perfectly. But is, man, I haven't had anything going on, especially this week. But I've been so. I think I speak for both of us when I say we've been so like spurred on and inspired because of the feedback that we've got from listeners of the podcast. And truth be told, I kind of only expected three or four of like my best friends to listen, and more of anything than out of duty because they know I'd kill them if they didn't even give it like one listen. Um, but to have people who I genuinely haven't seen or spoken to in 5, 6, 7 years reach out to me and say how much they really appreciate what we're doing, how much they've loved the podcast, how much they hope that we're gonna keep on going on with it, and really just jeered us on. Has been quite remarkable. Personally, I've had it from everyone. I've had it from old school friends that I haven't seen for 6, 7 years. I've had it from an ex teacher of mine who I hadn't seen we speak every now and again, but I haven't seen her since I left school. I've had it from what I wasn't expecting, man, was colleagues. So I kind of obviously, yeah, so I knew that everyone would listen in the sense of maybe friends or friends of friends, but I never thought that my colleagues would listen to it, and they're the people that kind of I felt the weirdest about when I found out that they were listening. Because obviously I put it on LinkedIn, like saying that we've now released a podcast and so on, and it got like some stupid number, like 700 views or something. I feel like I've gone viral on LinkedIn, but like a couple of those, well, a good few of those people, the majority of those, well, all of my office obviously have me on LinkedIn, and they've all seen that, and I wasn't expecting that because I wasn't going to tell my like work buds that I have a podcast about mental health and whatever else, and like to know that my like CEOs listened to it and kind of knows my deepest, darkest secrets already was like slightly unnerving. I was like, oh Jesus, and I'm sure that some of them will be listening to this one right now. But yeah, so that's so that has been a bit weird, man. But the response we've had has been like genuinely nothing short of sensational, and I suppose it's as good time as any. We've got the author Rose Yavner Taylor on, who's I found her out, and I found about a story on Grief Encounters, which is a podcast that I really enjoy, and she's written a book called 365 Days Past the Traffic Lights. And I mean, I'm not going to go too much into what the book's about because we're going to have her on and that's what she'll be talking about. But basically, she kind of suffered, like she went through a bereavement, and her dad kind of passed away, and she just realised that there was no literature for, I think she was 24 when that happened, and she realised that there was no literature for people her age, well, our age. And so she wrote this book about her experiences and how what she's learned from it, and what she would like to teach others who are maybe in a similar experience. For example, your friend would be that perfect example, because she said that she found that literature that had been written had either been written by, a 40-year-old who already had their kids with them and had other priorities to keep them kind of distracted, for want of a better word, or psychologist. And she said the vocabulary that was used was very cold and very professional and medical, and it lacked complete empathy. So I reached out to her just kind of off a whim, not expecting her to get in contact or anything, and she got straight back to us, and we're now in the midst of trying to get a date organised because she's based in London, so that's exciting. And then we've also got we're going to be doing a podcast with the hosts of Grief Encounters, which is based in Dublin, which is, yeah, exactly, a podcast based in Dublin. And guys, anyone who's suffered with grief, or even just, I listen to it because I want to learn how I can better help friends who are going through that type of thing. It's only a short podcast, it's 30 minutes each episode, and they just get people, some are like Rose, maybe have done something, a book or some sort of song or a film or a play out of their grief, or some have started a charity or started to raise awareness about specific diseases that, and it's really empathetic, it's really good, it's really nice. Obviously they have, almost all the guests have this lovely Irish accent which just soothes the soul. And it's a brilliant podcast, and I've been listening to them for well over a year now. And in fact, we have them published on our resources page, which has charities that we would recommend if people are suffering with anything, and it also has podcasts that we recommend people listen to, not just the Earthly Lies podcast. There's plenty of other podcasts that talk about mental health, and they're one of those people. They talk specifically about grief and bereavement. So to have people that we've looked up to kind of already get in touch with us, and we're going to organise a podcast with them in April as well, has really been something else. I don't think either of us expected it, so that's kind of put me in I've had a hop in my step for the past week. I genuinely have, so that's been brilliant. So guys, I just want to, anyone who's listening now, we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for how much support you've given us, because it means the world. And keep on sending messages. I've had people sending me messages going, look, I really like the podcast. I don't expect you to reply to me. I'm sure you've had loads of messages, but I just thought I'd let you know. I will reply to every single one of you till the day I die. Trust me, I have nothing better to do with my life. So if you want to send out a little bit of support, don't worry, you will get a reply from me within 3 seconds. So we really appreciate it, guys. But hey, listen, unless you want to add anything more, Jim, I think we should get straight into it, yeah?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Okay, so this is the part where we're going to talk about smartphones, social media, all of that use, and kind of just what we think of it really. I think I come at it from a bit of a different angle, Jim, because obviously my job, I'm a social media campaign manager. So I feel like I'm almost in the belly of the beast because I understand exactly how it works. I understand how they've made it commercial and how our data is now the biggest commodity there is in the world. You know, there's part of me that doesn't, I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I know that I don't like it, but there's another part of me that goes, well, that's born a whole sector out of it. You know, that's my job. If it wasn't for the commercialization of data, I would not have a job in Spain, just plainly speaking. And I recognize how they can, how they can specifically target a group of people and make, if I wanted to make sure that you, Jim, living in Dublin, age 26, with certain interests, this, that, and the other, wanted to see a specific ad, I can make sure that that ad comes onto your phone by putting in certain details. And why I think that's important is I don't think people realize how important their data has become. And when we signed up to Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of it, no one read the terms and conditions. And to be honest, Facebook at the start, they didn't even know that data would become so commercial, so commercially viable. And so it was kind of a mishap. They didn't know what they were getting into. We didn't know what we were getting into, but we've kind of signed away our life and signed away our privacy for certain. And we're now at a point of no return, I think. There's a few people at our age who don't use social media or use it very selectively. But the vast majority of us, I think it's so ingrained into our lifestyle now that the thought of not having social media is almost, it's just impossible to fathom. It'd be like the thought of not having a hot shower in the morning. It's almost like a human right these days. So it's scary how that it's got its hooked into us deep,
When you said that you want to talk about this, I felt like I needed to have some sort of small written thing that I could really get started on. And what I want to say is basically that I think we all know some statistic concerning the harm of excessive smartphone use or social media use. And then I don't want to criticize like, oh yeah, all these people on their phone, because I know some people have, like, their job entails them to spend a lot of time on their phone. Their job entails them to spend a lot of time on social media. But the impact, or like what I notice most, is on conversation and interactions. For instance, nowadays you see people sit down, and if there's no immediate chatter, if there's no immediate eye contact, it's straight away whip out the iPhone, myself included. Or if I'll just check something. Or when you are talking with someone and then there's a bit of a silence period, they take out the phones again, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't need to interact anymore. And then this is all kind of unconscious. This is all the brain going, oh yeah, I want some dopamine right now, instead of actually trying to further this conversation or to look at this situation from a different point of view. And one thing that I've really learned about since I've been away in Denmark is I don't know, one thing I really appreciate is silence now. And like I used to always try to fill silence. Like silence was something to be filled. And now I kind of just like the silence just playing out. And then kind of just taking it out of my hands and making somebody else or see how the silence unfolds, I used to fear the silence, and now I embrace the silence.
You sound like some like villain out of Batman. You were like something. What is it? I was born in the dark. You were merely adopted by it, or some stupid shit like that. That's what you sound like. But no, I definitely get what you're saying. I think even launching this podcast, it's been noticeable to me how badly I actually talk. I edit these podcasts afterwards and try to take out little noises in the background that you may hear, and the amount of times that I said
yeah.
Which maybe I shouldn't bring that to the audience's attention because now they're going to listen out for it. But I say that, or used to say that, every 3 seconds, and it would be so. I get what you're saying. It's like, and that's how I spoke, and I think that's purely because, and I will talk to the cows come home, but it's what you're saying. Conversation is an art form. It genuinely is. To be able to maintain and have a good conversation, to express your ideas clearly and succinctly, and not go round and round, which is another thing that I used to do. I used to go round and round and beat around the bush so much before I got to my point. And a point that should take me 15 seconds to get to could take me 3 minutes. And I know that because when I'd edit the podcast, I would listen to myself talking, like, Jesus Christ, Seb, get it over with. Like, you've made your point, but you're just keep on talking. It's just I was waiting for you to stop me or someone else to stop me because, like you said, that silence, I wasn't comfortable with it. I wanted to always fill it. And so all these little things, it's startling how much of effect it has had. And I've made a conscious effort now where when I go out with friends, if we're on a table or a bar or wherever it may be, I turn my phone over on the table so I don't see the notifications. I don't get anything. But if it were to ring, I could pick it up because I always think you never know, why someone's ringing. You could be an emergency, potentially someone's dying or whatever it may be. So I leave it on the table so that if it were to ring, I could pick it up at at a moment's notice. But I don't get all the notifications, and that has played a massive difference in the conversations that I've been having with my friends and how present we are in the moment. And it's something that I think, and you told me that this is just your friends and that maybe I've got a distorted view of Dublin, but it's something that I noticed when I came over to visit you was that your friends, they were so much in tune and they were so much more present in the moment when you were talking, and they didn't look at their phones every 3 seconds. And it actually struck me, which sounds stupid, but it struck me that they didn't. It left an impact on me whereby ever since the way I imagine Irish people to be is to be completely present in the moment and not to almost more evolved in that sense, because of the impact that it left on me because of the experience I had. So I think it's definitely something. It's a tick, isn't it? We all have it. I sometimes, and I kid you not, James, sometimes I feel as if my phone has vibrated in my pocket.
Really, man?
And I take my phone out because I think I've got a notification of whatever it may be, and there's no notification whatsoever. And I read up, and that's actually quite common. It's got a name, which now, for the life of me, I can't remember, but that's actually a name. It's something called like phantom. I might be making this up now, but something like phantom vibration or whatever, whereby, because we're so alert to the vibrations, we actually now make them up in our head. And we imagine that we've had a vibration when there's been nothing come through. Which just is like, it's scary how it's actually got into the hard wiring of our brains,
Yeah, man, it just made me think, there's a Childish Gambino song where somewhere in the song he inserts the tone that most people have for like their WhatsApp notification. And the amount of times I've listened to that song and checked my phone, even though I know it's in the song, and he definitely put it in his song just to say, "Here, you're looking at your phone too much. Enjoy the music."
It's scary, man. But I think it's important to say, to caveat anything that we're going to say about social media and the use of phones, is that it has brought us so many advantages. The fact that we've got Rose and we're going to be interviewing the girls from Grief Encounters, like, that was only possible because social media was there. There would have been no other way for us to really reach out for them from Madrid. Things that I can keep in touch with you, and you've been in Denmark or Dublin, and I've been in Madrid. That's thanks to WhatsApp, and all of these things is, the fact that we have a podcast and that we can share it. I didn't tell you, but there's someone who's listening in Myanmar, Burma, like East Asia. There's one person. That's how far this podcast has got in its first week. And that is only possible because somehow, some way they saw it on social media. And I know that's true because when it said that they've come onto the podcast, it showed where they came from and it said social media. So all of these things, there's such huge advantages, but it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? And that other side of the sword is very sharp indeed. You spoke with John, which is the next podcast that will get released in 2 weeks' time. So keep an eye out for that one. But John doesn't really use social media. Why is that? He's one of the few people who not only does he not use, I don't use Facebook now. I've got it, but I don't use it. But he literally does not use any of it. Why is that?
The first thing I have to say is John will say he doesn't use social media, but he has a very active LinkedIn account, which I would describe as
right.
Social media. No, he doesn't use social media, man, because I think he realized that it wasn't adding anything to his life, or if the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, to borrow a phrase. And he was just like, all right, what's important to me is checking these notifications. Particularly important. Can I get my news from another source? Yes. Can I keep in contact with people through another means? Yes. Can people send me some funny videos on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram that I might have missed? Yes. And so he was just like, okay. Um, that's what I got from him anyway.
And he's in America, isn't he? So
Nashville, yeah.
Yes. Have you actually seen it in the sense of with your relationship? Have you seen it just as easy or maybe harder or to keep in contact with him? Have you seen that it's had a detrimental or positive effect on your relationship? The fact that he doesn't use social media.
I would say it's only gotten better, but in my head it's just because now he has more time for the people in his life that he really cares about. And so if maybe we had a 15-minute call one time, now we can have 45 minutes because you know how quickly half an hour can go on the phone. And I think he really uses his phone for work and to ring people that he cares about, and then everything else is a little less important to him. And what I will say though is because I really don't use social media also. I mean, I have a Twitter account which is quite tame, but I don't have Facebook. I don't use Facebook or Instagram anymore.
The bane of my life in this release of the podcast. So I've been sharing things non-stop with absolutely no shame. Like Jim sharing, like I've only got 5 followers on Twitter, but if you think it helps, then fine. Like for God's sake, I wish you were an influencer right now.
And you know, it's funny, man. My good friend always. So every time I meet up with him, he has saved videos from Instagram. He was like, "Man, you're such a coward. I wish you had Instagram. I was going to send you all these videos, but now I'm going to show you them in real life," which I really appreciate. But I know, like, I miss out on some stuff. And this is what I was going to say, which I don't know how John's been able to do it, because this is one thing I struggle with. Is now that I'm not on social media, I'm out of the loop, like, and I'm fine with it. But what I notice now, particularly when I come back to Dublin or like a city and where there are a lot of people in the loop, compared to the farm in Denmark, there's just conversations that I just can't even have an input in. And one thing I've noticed with John is John does have knowledge about these topics. So I actually should have this conversation with him. But that's one thing that I think, I don't know if people are really aware of it or really think about it, but if they do stop using social media, or if they do really minimize their smartphone use, this will be an inevitable consequence. You will find yourself have more time, like you can like start playing an instrument or do whatever you wanted to do. You'll find yourself, you'll have like an hour and a half, 2 hours more time in the evening or in the morning, but you will find yourself less able to jump in to the average conversation.
The stat that I always get at the end of the month, which I absolutely hate, sorry, at the end of the month, at the end of every week, is it shows me how much I'm on my phone. So it'll say, this week you are on your phone on average, and my average recently has been 5 hours a day.
5 hours a day?
Yeah. Which is like you're saying, saving time. It's not 1 or 2 hours, that's 5 hours. Because I use my phone for basically 3 things. Social media, Spotify podcasts, and WhatsApp for like texting people. That's it. I don't really use my phone for anything else. I don't use it. So if I took away social media, that must be at least 3 hours, because I'm not on the podcast app for 2 hours a day. Do you know what I'm saying? It counts active hours. So that's like scary. 5 hours a day. You know, that's 30 hours. That's a day and a half. Sorry, a day and a quarter of just every week of just being on that phone is quite
20% of your life.
Yeah.
And if you take that away, if you take away sleeping, that's a huge percentage of your day.
Yeah.
Exactly. Of your waking day.
Yeah. So that's it's something that I've noticed, and I think this kind of, how do I explain this? I think social media, what it does is it brings out the worst in us in terms of being not nosy. You know, I have people on my Instagram or Twitter that, in all honesty, I don't have any active interest in their life. I haven't spoken to them for 6 years. But if I were to unfollow them, I would not know anything about them. And it's kind of what you're saying. You know, I can go back to Lincoln, and we can be talking about an old school friend who I haven't actually spoken to for 6 years, but I know what they're doing. Like, I know what they're up to. So I can, like you said, I can jump into that conversation. Whereas if I was not to follow them or not to have social media at all, I wouldn't know what they're doing, but at least still I probably wouldn't know what my friends are doing. I mean, some of my friends, yes, because we talk more often, but I have some of my very good friends. We actually don't talk that much, but they're still like some of my best mates. But we just don't talk that much about things. And so we kind of just talk when we're in person, but we don't talk over the phone and so on. So I'd be, like you said, I'd be completely out of the loop. But then I think,
Yeah.
well, how much am I actually learning about these people that I follow? Because what do we actually see on social media? And I think most people, 99% of people, only show the best part of their lives. And so you look at someone
Yeah.
and you go, oh, that person, they've got such an amazing life. They're doing this, they're doing that, yada yada yada. But the reality is, like, they probably have a shit boss, and they're probably a bit annoyed, and they probably had an argument with their boyfriend or whatever it may be. But then that night they've uploaded an old picture from Barbados where they look 10 out of 10, and you think, Jesus Christ, this person's got the best life ever, while I'm like slugging away.
That's it, man. It's like when you see them, or when you see videos of them or pictures they put up, you have the illusion that you know what's going on with them. And then you think, okay, I don't need to call them. I saw that they were doing this, or they saw this were doing this. But there's so much that you get from that call that you wouldn't have got just from the video. And then, yeah, there's like there's a huge discrepancy between what you think you know and what you actually know.
100%. And I think to some extent that might have something to do with the limited success that we've had in the or 2 weeks that we've been live with the podcast, is that people are actually listening to two guys talk about their inner secrets, the darkest things in their life, and put it out there for anyone to listen to, not just a friend or two. Like this podcast, like I said, there's someone in Myanmar listening to this right now. I can categorically say I don't know anyone from that country. So, do you know what I mean? We're literally putting this out to everyone, and I think that's what's impacted people so much and affected people so much with this podcast, is that it's not normal to see those things. You know, it's not normal to see a post on Instagram saying, oh, recently I've been like struggling, this, that, and the other. I really haven't enjoyed my job. I'm going to take a few weeks off, or just put that, you know, I've been struggling, something along those lines. You don't see that. You only ever see the good parts of someone's life, and I think it's a slightly hollow choice that we've made. And it's a fake choice that we've made, because ultimately we all know it's a one big game. You know, we all know that it's fake, and people may not know, but Jim and I try to be anyway. Maybe Jim with more success. Is some form of poets, and we write every now and again when we feel inspired by something, or where we feel like something is affecting us. Like deeply to the point where we need to write it out on paper. And the poem that I've written a lot, and most of them are shit. But if you want to check them out, they're on the Earthly Lights podcast website. But the one that am most proud of, and I think is hits the nail on the head more than anything else, is the one that's called Whisper. I just wanted to read it out now, just because I think it fits in perfectly to what we're saying right now. And it goes. Where is true conversation? Have we lost privacy to the past? We no longer talk with intimacy, for our dealings must be broadcast. We pay homage to the social media gods for increased connectivity. They render us empty. Speaking hollow words has become our proclivity. If we do not post every essence online, is it just a figment of our imagination? As we lose the personal touch, I wonder what will become of our civilization. Our circles grow exponentially, whilst our inner circles tighten with a deathly grip. Have we become slaves to public opinion? Has social media become the whip? Time to rid ourselves of our electronic masters and speak frankly to the soul. Drop the bravado and pretense of a perfect life. Start to tell our story whole. Wealth is not measured by monetary value, for time is our currency, so invest it well. Because in a world of white noise, maybe it's better to whisper than to yell. And like,
I love that poem, man.
I wrote it, and it took me 15 minutes, not because I'm some genius, but because it just flowed out of me, because it's so true, I think, personally. Not to pat myself on the back, but you know, it's this whole thing of we have to broadcast our life. If you looked at my social media, it might not be like clearly obvious that I've had a girlfriend for 6 years, you know, because I don't post everything that Louise and I do together. Every now and again, I'll post a picture of us, but I'm not that one who's constantly putting a story out of us or whatever. It's just every now and again, you know, it might not be obvious what I'm doing or what you're doing, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing it, you know. We are doing these things. I do have a girlfriend called Louisa. She's in the room next to me right now. You know, but people, I think they have this thing of if they don't put it on social media, it's no longer real. It's not real. It's like when people meet a celebrity, they have to take the photo. I would much rather just talk to the celebrity and be like, oh man, I love that goal that you scored against Man United and blah, blah, blah. But it's like if I told my friends that I'd met my favourite footballer and I'd had a conversation with them, but I didn't have the photo to prove it, I guarantee most people would call me a bullshitter. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's just that thing, but extrapolated to everything. It's like I only went to Barbados if I put it on Instagram. Because if I didn't put it on Instagram, what's the point? Like, why would I even go there? I'm not going to get a good few beach selfies on there. You know?
All right, but Seb, have you ever put up something where it shows a different side of you, where life isn't so gravy?
I once put up. So when I was in South America, I'll see if I can get it up now. I put so I was going around South America for like 3 months with my friends. And
right,
we were on like this like deserted like beach, and it's absolutely freezing. But anyway, so we went into the sea and whatever else, and there was literally no one else. There was just me, my friend Zoo, and my friend Jez. Anyway, so we're on this beach, right? And then all of a sudden, like, what is that? There's like this random thing, and it was a sea lion, but it was like
right.
its corpse. It was like the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and I just like kind of tongue in cheek. Took a picture of it on Instagram of its corpse, and I put it on my Instagram, and I just said, "This is a dead sea lion. Whilst you look at this disturbing imagery, I want you to ponder something. What is life without death?" Right now, that was just tongue in cheek. I'm just taking the piss. Do you know how many messages I got? People going, "Why did you put that on Instagram? Like, take that down." As in, like, my friends telling me to take it down because they were like offended of it, and then they were like, "Why didn't you just take a nice picture on the beach? Like, you're obviously on a beach here. Why did you not just take a nice picture?" That picture got 19 likes, so 20 likes. The next picture, which was at Machu Picchu, got 70, which for me is like a lot. I don't really get that many likes. Do you know what I'm saying? But
lesson,
this is what I'm saying. Like, I didn't. It
only
wasn't
for
necessarily
positivity.
negative, but it wasn't positive. You know, it wasn't the horizon on a Peruvian beach. It was a corpse of a dead sea lion, which I actually think is way more interesting, to be quite honest. Like, how many people have seen a dead sea lion? Not many, I don't think. And yeah, I got shit for it, man. I got people telling me to take it down. To like, why would I ever do this? So I was like, right, okay, I've learned my lesson. You know. No, my lesson is just that, like, put things up as and when you feel like it, but maybe not things that might disturb people. But equally, the thing is as well, I don't put stuff up that like when I'm feeling shit or whatever. Not because I don't acknowledge it, but just because I've got friends that I can talk to about it in person, you know? And so I don't get any benefit. Like, if I was to put something out on it, let's say next week, right? I'm really down in the dumps. I've had an argument, and I'm feeling a bit shit about myself. Now, if I was to put it on Instagram, I don't know, maybe a few people would reach out to me, but they're not going to be like the people that I want to speak to. I don't need to reach out on Instagram to get support. I can just go to my friend and call a number of people and just go, "Hey, how you doing? Blah blah. I'm feeling a bit shit. Like, can we just have a little chat?" And they would be there. Do you know what I mean? That's just how it is. So I don't need to put that on Instagram, you know, to let people know I'm not a celebrity that's having to tell people why I've not been active for the past 6 months. No one gives a shit if I'm not active for 6 months. Do you know what I'm saying?
And it's strange though as well, man, because everybody knows that you're gonna go through ups and downs, and that if you did put up something that was not, a beacon of positivity, that everyone wouldn't assume, or should, like, it would be, to me it's strange to assume that if I put something, that appearingly is a bit inquisitive or sad or whatever, that, oh no, like, Jim's like this now, oh my god, or whatever. Because when you're telling this, I'm reminded of Tyler the Creator, yeah? He had an album out 2 or 3 years ago called Flower Boy, and on the album he's, like, particularly a few songs, he's kind of asking some serious questions about like his friendships, what's he doing with his time, what's his purpose, and then a lot of people were saying, oh my God, like Tyler is in such a bad place, this and this, and oh we should, oh what about Tyler? And he's like, no, I'm not in a bad place. I just think it's necessary to ask these questions, and I'm better for it, you know, rather than not bringing these topics up and just keep on talking about the same things. You know, how many times can you put up the same similar genre of picture in a similar caption? But yeah, again, I often don't want to start bashing people who use social media. If they use social media and they get, you know, benefit from it, use it. Of course, use it. You know, why it's helped us so much. It's helped a lot of people so much. I wonder. The real question I want to ask is, how many people who are questioning whether or not they are spending too much time on their phone or on social media are willing
to go without it for like a week and just
experience the consequences of what that entails.
In whatever way,
you know,
maybe bad or maybe good. Like it's dependent on each person. When I've made concerted effort to use not just social media but just my phone less, I've noticed improvements. I've noticed that I'm much more kind of aware of things that are happening around me, and not, you know, I'm not reading memes from some person in Nashville. Like I'm aware of what's happening around me within the office or at home or with my friends when I'm out in a bar or whatever. But like I say, it's hard to get out of that. You know, that routine of just flipping over your phone every couple of seconds, just seeing if anything's there, updating your Twitter feed, your Instagram feed, seeing what people are doing. It's so hard to get out of that, and it's funny because our parents, every now and again you see some parent who won't get off Facebook, and you're just like, oh bless them. But the majority of our parents have no idea really the real implications of social media. Obviously most of them know what it is, but they don't. My dad doesn't have any of that stuff, and he doesn't really care. He doesn't want to have any of that stuff, and I think we're such different, literally a different species because of it. You know, I think the fact when my mum was comparing how she grew up and how my sister grew up as young teenage girls, I was like, my sister has so many more social pressures to deal with than you did, because, you know, my mum, when she was at school, you're popular or you're pretty or whatever in the confines of your own school. No one's comparing you to the rest of the people in the city, or worse still, when it comes to like beauty and stuff, comparing you to the social norms of the world. You know, my sister can be compared to someone in California, LA. In the 1960s, that wasn't the case. You were kind of good looking or not compared to everyone else in your school, and that's as far as it ever went, you know. Bullying, you know, if you were bullied, not saying that you had it easy, but if you were bullied back in the day, again, that was confined to your school parameters. Once you got home, the bully could no longer touch you anymore. They had no physical way of getting to you. Whereas now, if you're being bullied, if that bully wants to, they can just target you all day, every day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Because you go home and they'll just get onto your Facebook and they'll get onto your Instagram and they'll just message you shit. There's no way you can get away from it now, you know? It's just a complete 360 involvement. And once you're in that ecosystem, it's so hard to kind of peel yourself away.
I totally agree with you. But you said something like we were fundamentally different beings from our parents. I would say yes and no, because also I've talked to several of my friends who have told me about their parents who do kind of have, maybe not social media, but kind of a smartphone addiction. And this is because it's not necessarily because we don't do it either. Nobody does it very consciously. It's all unconscious or subconsciously, where you're like, oh yeah, my brain remembers what it feels like to whip out the phone and see that I got this message, or see I got this like, or whatever. And it's the same for parents. Like I remember one of my friends was telling me that his dad is mad addicted to one of the games on the smartphone, like the you know, the games that suck you in and try to get you on levels,
like Candy Crush.
Yeah, they suck you in, and oh, you're doing so much better. Oh, you didn't play as much as you did yesterday. All this kind of stuff. So, as much as we are different, we've had a completely different upbringing. We still have a very similar mind, in how the mind just wants these short hits, and unless you take a break and realize, I'm more focused on the long term, the long term hits. Then you just fall into the trap. So because even I was talking to my uncle last week or the week before, and he was saying that none of his grandkids have smartphones, and I think maybe they're like 12, 10, and 8, so something like this. And he was saying that I think the age should be X. I can't remember what the age was. And I was saying I don't really think there's an age, because I was telling him that I personally think he is somewhat addicted to the smartphone, you know? But he would never admit that, you know?
Yeah, he'll say that it's for work or whatever else, you know. But you're talking about the small hits of dopamine. It brought to mind there's an experiment that happened where they were trying to test the kind of addiction levels of heroin. Now, bear with me. What they did is they got these rats and they put them, in a rat cage, and they had like two little bottles of water. One was just normal water, and then one was laced with heroin. And obviously, the rats had no way of telling which one's which. They would try both, thinking that they were both probably just water. And then what would happen was they would use the heroin laced water to excess and basically overdose and kill themselves. Okay. And so that was like, seen as conclusive proof that, heroin is this awful substance and so on and so forth. But then a scientist took it further and said, well, yeah, but, the rats didn't have anything else to do. All they had was they just were just in this cage. So what they did was they then made this kind of rat heaven. And they made this cage that had everything, all the toys, everything that a rat could ever possibly want was in that cage, yeah? With other rats. And they did the same thing. They put two bottles of water, one with just normal water, one with laced with heroin. And the rats would try both, again, not knowing which one's which. But then the rats, once they knew that, obviously they didn't know it was heroin, but they knew there was something funky with the other water, they just stopped using it. And they just went for the normal water. And they just lived happily in rat heaven with all the rest of their rats. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, the takeaway from that is that, well, at least my takeaway from that was the antidote to addiction is community, is togetherness, right? Because when these rats were alone and they had nothing else to do, no other stimuli, all they did was they just overdosed on the heroin. But once the rats were part of a community, they had their own little rat friends, and they were all in this amazing rat cage that had everything a rat could possibly want. They didn't touch the H2O water once they found out that it was a bit weird. They didn't touch it. And I think you can kind of draw some parallels to social media being the H2O. Sorry, the heroin-laced water. In the sense of the more recluse you become and the more that the less that you kind of actively socialize in person with people, the more we then feel a need to socialize on social media and form these fake friendships and have these fake conversations. A conversation, even over text, is so much different to a conversation over the phone for one, but then obviously taking it to the next level in person. The words can be the same, but the conversation is completely different, and so it's funny. That's what the poem's about. What I said is that we, are out at, what is it? What I said, like the line. Where is it? Our social circles grow exponentially, whilst our inner circles tighten with a deathly grip. Have we become slaves to public opinion? Her social media become the whip. And what I mean by that is, now everyone has 3,000 followers on their Instagram page. So you would assume, I have something like 480 friends, which actually I don't think is that many friends because I've weeded out a few people. But 480, now I don't talk to 480 people on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean? I maybe speak to like 5, 6, 7. But like, this is what's happening is we're getting more and more followers and friends on Facebook, and yet our actual friends have become that group is becoming closer and closer. And then we've now, like we were saying before, we've become slaves to public opinion. We want to show that we're having the best life, that we're having the most fun. And so we kind of bow down to the social media gods, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we become more and more of a recluse. And so you tweet from your bed and 500 people see it. So you think you're socializing, but you're actually just in your bed, in your boxers, alone. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you could be in a bar with just one friend and you're talking to that person. That's a much more real conversation, and you'll come home and you'll feel better for it. Like you've had an actual human interaction.
Yeah. What's happening in essence is, what I believe to be happening is when someone is seeing pictures of their friends or just people that they've chosen to connect with, and say this person is going through a tough time, or this person's having a bad day, or whatever, and they see these other people, their colleagues or their fellow students or whatever, and they appear to be having a great time, then they start wondering like, oh, maybe, oh, why am I as in this situation? And we talked about it a bit before, but this is kind of what they've seen on a bigger scale. So in terms of like the idea of happiness, so obviously Denmark gets appointed number one or number two as the happiest country in the world for the last 5 or 10 years anyway. And I was listening to a podcast about the whole happiness culture, I guess, in Denmark. And they were talking about, oh, this social services are so good, and this is why, and this is why, and this is why. And they're just listing all these reasons why the happiness is so high. But then towards the end of the documentary, they brought up the point that Denmark has one of the highest suicide rates in Europe, and that the researchers call this the happiness suicide paradox, meaning because Denmark is the happiest country in the world, someone who's having a bad day or a bad month is starting to think, hey, like this is something with me, this is not something this is not something quote unquote normal. Yeah, it's like, oh, this is some, whereas, you know, in another country, if people are a bit more expressive about how they're feeling, whether it's up or down, you're less likely to say, oh, when I'm feeling bad, like, oh, this must just be me because everyone else is happy. No, they've seen that other people are going through some stuff, so they're less likely to do something, you know, extreme when they're also feeling a similar way, you know?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and it links perfectly back to what we were talking about in the sense of, you know, people making out their lives on social media is perfect because you see that and then you go, what the fuck is wrong with me that I'm not going to these amazing holiday places every weekend and I'm not doing, you know, bottomless brunches every fucking Sunday and all the rest of it, and you start to think like, what's wrong with me? But then you realize that these people probably haven't done something for 3 weeks. They've just saved the fucking photos, and now they're just releasing them like on a drip level to make it look like their life has been unreal, but in reality they've just had a good weekend. But they're now extrapolating that out to make it look like they've had a good month. And I think it's so relevant. I think it's you know, we were talking and you kind of allude to it in the next podcast that's coming out with John, but this thing of fur coat and no knickers, which is a phrase that John said, which actually I absolutely loved. But it is that thing, isn't it? Of, you know, inside we know what we really have or don't have, depending on your situation. But we have to make sure that on the outside, everyone thinks that our life is top dollar and that we don't mess around and that we've got the best things going for us. But actually, we know that. And I think the vast majority of people, man, their lives are so normal, you know. But there's nothing wrong with normality. There's nothing wrong with, you know, every day that I walk to work and come back home from work, the barber's there. Right, he's my barber that cuts my hair. He's literally 50 meters away from my house. I see him and I say hello to him every day. No, I'm not going to post that on Twitter or Instagram. Do you know what I mean? Because that's not people who gives a shit. But that's just normal life. But that's nice. That's nice. There's nothing wrong with that. There's something commendable to that, you know? To putting in a hard day's shift, coming home, like having a little joke and a laugh with your barber, talking with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or going out with some friends, and just like calling it a day. You tuck in, you watch whatever it is that you watch with a cup of tea or whatever it may be, whatever is your vice, and you go to sleep. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But that's no longer become Instagram worthy. You know, that's now. Don't bore me with that. Like, I only want to know if you've gone on a safari, but anything else, like, get out of here, you know?
But this is funny, man, because I think if you stop if you stop like taking pictures to then eventually put on social media, right? If you stop doing that, or if you stop doing actions full stop, like going to these restaurants or whatever you're doing on social media, if you stop doing that or for one of the main reasons to then you could get a nice picture and stuff, you'll start doing more things just for the act of doing them. So I remember I was talking to John, I don't think it's on the podcast, but we were talking about doing things as an end to an end rather than like an end to a mean. A means to an end, yeah. So like, oh yeah, I like going to this park every day. Or I like doing this, and you just do it because you want to do it, rather than there's something for external, some external gratification for doing it. You know?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, but if I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, there's you could argue that maybe this whole thing of fur coat and no knickers, this isn't a modern phenomenon. This is something that's happened, that's been been in the human psyche for years, for decades. I mean, the phrase itself, all fur coat and no knickers, that doesn't come from the 2010s. That comes from the 1900s, and I wrote a piece. I'm not going to read the piece out because it's a long piece. And if you want to go, like I said, it's on the website, which is theearthlylightspodcast.com. And under there, you'll see the segments are words, and you can see all the pieces that me and Jim have written, and we'll keep on publishing there. But I cite this poem, which was written by a guy called Stevie Smith in 1957. So that was like over 50 years ago, over half a century ago. And I'll read this poem out. It's very short, right? Tell me if this isn't completely pertinent and has this relatability factor now in 2020. Ready? Nobody heard him, the dead man, but he still lay mourning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh no, it was too cold always. Still the dead man lay mourning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving but drowning. And it's this whole thing of like people see this guy, right? The imagery is people see this guy in the river and he's waving, or what they consider to be is waving, but actually he's drowning and he's splashing about, okay? And then he dies, and they go, "Oh, poor bastard! Like he always loved like messing around." But I guess that's what happens. And he's like, "No, I was never waving. I was shouting for help because I'm like struggling here, but you've taken it as like I'm like having a whale of a time in the sea." And it's the complete opposite. But because of the way that we want to perceive ourselves, they made him out to be this guy who was having loads of fun. That was written in 1957. And I was like, if someone had told me that had been written in 2019, I would have gone, "Oh, that like hits the nail on the head." And it might, if you're like, you might think, where have I heard that phrase? Not waving but drowning. Lord Kana, his latest album's titled that, and he cites this poem as the inspiration for that album. So like one of our modern contemporaries, like one of the biggest rappers in the UK, and who's known for being really honest about how he feels and what life is. You know, he doesn't rap about girls and bling, and he found this poem and he was like, "Look, this was written like 60 years ago, and it's spot on. Like it hits the nail on the head." And I'm wondering if. Obviously, social media does have a massive part to play on it, but it must surely, if this was written in 1957, there must be something deeper to it where we don't want people in the community to know that maybe we're not having the celebrity lifestyle.
There's a fear of vulnerability for sure, uh, and I remember I was watching an interview with an American author. I can't remember what he said, but he was saying that you can use this vulnerability and kind of flip it as not even a sense of power, but a sense of liberation or freedom. To say that you're not holding anything, you've expressed it, or you can choose, or like the vulnerability can be too large for you to possibly gamble with somebody else's knowing or several other people's knowing. So it's an individual case. Like I've talked to people privately, and they've told me that they're not willing to be vulnerable about certain aspects of their life because they had certain experiences where this vulnerability has been taken for weakness, or vulnerability has been taken advantage of, and I totally understand that. But I also think that there are a lot of people that could be in the position to use this vulnerability as liberation. Like there's and it is the case. I mean, when I'm on Twitter now, I do see a lot more positive posts, or as in positive
Realistic posts.
Yeah, realistic posts.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, man. I think the liberation point that you saw in the interview, I couldn't agree more with that. I wrote about it in that piece, Not Waving But Drowning, where I said, that I think every friendship group is you're assigned a role, aren't you? Everyone has their kind of little designated roles within a friendship group. You've got the funny one, the happy-go-lucky one, the maybe more serious one, the maybe the spiritual one, the mother hen one, and so on and so forth. So it goes on, right? And I was like, it's hard to break free of those roles and I was always seen as the happy-go-lucky one. That was just my role within, because that's who I was, and that's how my friends saw me. And I felt some completely misguided notion that I had to kind of uphold that thing of being the happy-go-lucky one, even when I was going through the deepest, darkest moments of my life, and I absolutely felt anything but happy-go-lucky. But yet, when it came to my friends, and these are my close friends, not like some people who I don't really know. These are my close friends. When it came to them and meeting up with them, I would it would literally be an act, and I would turn myself on and go, right, okay, Seb, now you go happy-go-lucky, and I'd be there cracking jokes, laughing, making out that I'm always happy, and that wasn't the case. And then it got to a point, and you're saying about liberation. It got to a point where I was like, man, I am drowning here, and I need to reach out. And so I did. I reached out to my friends and I told them what had been going on. And one of my best mates, he said to me, he was like, oh, and he's a serious guy. Like, he's someone who I could have had this conversation with. He's not a typical lad. He's very open to having those conversations. And he said to me, he said, oh, Seb, I'm so sorry, I never knew. And what he said was, these were his actual words. He said, you just always seem so happy to me. And I thought, see, there's the problem. That's my fault. Like, I played that role perfectly. I should have got an Oscar for it. But at what cost? Like, the cost was my own actual mental health. And then once I started to tell people, like you said, that liberation, like, I felt free again. I felt myself, I say in the piece, I felt myself regaining buoyancy. And I was no longer drowning. I could actually breathe air once more. And that's because I didn't have to uphold this role of being the happy-go-lucky one anymore. And I think my role has almost, to some extent, switched within my friendship group. And now that I talk about this, and obviously with the podcast and so on and so forth, I've become the more serious one, if you will, or the more frank one, and people will talk to me about whatever it is, and I'll talk to them about whatever's going on. I don't have to do this act of like, oh, here's Seb, he best be happy, because if not, like, he's going to disappoint. And obviously, like, my friends never thought that way anyway. It was just something that I had made up in my own head. And I think a lot of people do it, man. I think a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to, burden someone else with my own shit. So I'm just going to keep that behind closed doors. And once I go out to see my friends and whoever it may be, I'll just put on a brave face. And Louisa, for example, my girlfriend, the person who I'm close to in the world, she's, even now, man, I still think I don't tell her as much as I tell my friends and stuff, because I don't want her to, like, when I speak to my friends, especially now being in Madrid, I see them every, 2-3 months, roughly, and I speak to them maybe every 2-3 weeks. Whereas I see Louisa every single day, and I speak to her every day. Now, if I was to tell her how I felt every single day, now I've been in a lot better mood recently, but over the last 3 years, if I had told her how I felt every single day over those last 3 years, I think she would have put me on suicide watch. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't want to worry her, so I kept it in. And so it's all these these intricacies that make you withhold information and make you feel like you have to only be happy, and that you can only put happy things on Instagram and so on and so forth. And it all just kind of feeds into each other. And before you know it, you are drowning. And that liberation is so real. I couldn't agree more with whoever it was that you watched. I couldn't agree more that sharing your experiences and being, I guess, naked to some extent is liberating, because there's no secrets anymore. Like, it is what it is, Like, if someone wants to know anything about me, once these podcasts build up and we talk more about our own personal situations, they'll just be able to listen to this podcast. And in some way, that'll be liberating to be like, I don't hold it in anymore. Like, that my parents got divorced. That this thing happened with me in Italy. This happened here. This is how I feel about certain subjects. And it is what it is. Like, I don't have to put on an act anymore. Well, yeah, everything's great back home. Everything's brilliant. Yeah, thanks for asking. Do you know what I mean? It's tiring, man, to do that every single fucking day. It really wears you out.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny, because a while ago I was a bit unsure about how I felt about it, but I remember it was when I came home from Australia, I was particularly, like, just, I don't know, devoid of energy, and I just was really uninspired just by day-to-day things. And then I had this job interview. I remember I went to the interview, and I was on the bus, and I was like, oh, why am I going to this? Like, oh, whatever. And then I walk into the building, walk into the office, and then I perform. I do the performance, and I make a joke and this and that, and the interview went reasonably well, and I walked out, and I felt really good, man. And I was getting the bus home, and I was like, oh yeah, I mean, maybe we do have to just do this. maybe we do need this relative level of performance. But then I knew that I would just feel the exact same in a few days after this high was gone, and that this performance isn't sustainable. It's that's. But I think a lot of people like myself could you can fool yourself into thinking that, oh yeah, I mean, this is just how it has to be, or maybe like it works for me or whatever. I think sooner or later it can catch up on you.
100%. And I think we should, unless you want to add anything else in, I think that was like the perfect way to finish it off and leave that topic there. Maybe we'll come back to it. And do you want to add anything in?
No, man, that's
No?
perfect.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there because we can go round and round in circles with this topic. I think it's one of those ones that's never ending and is always morphing. And I definitely think in 2 years' time, this conversation will be completely different because there'll be new social media platforms out and but I think if you are listening to this and you've made your way to 1 hour and 5 minutes or whatever it is now, guys, if you're suffering at all with whatever it may be, it might be the simplest thing, the most what you think is trivial. Reach out to your friends, your families. They are your life raft. They'll help you from feeling like you're drowning, and they're always there. Trust me, they're unequivocally supportive. That's what I found in my case, and people will surprise you, even people who you think you don't really have much of a relationship with. I'm sure that once people know how you're really feeling, they'll be there for you. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh well, I've got a cushy life and everything's going well with me. Well, first and foremost, share your secret because I'm very jealous. But secondly, think about your friends, man, and especially think about those ones. Think about those ones who are always cracking a laugh and a smile, because sometimes they're the ones who are struggling the most, and they're the ones who need that question. And maybe you just have to ask them outright. Just say, how are you really feeling? Not like, oh, you're right, mate. Just ask them the question and be ready for them to maybe give you an answer that you're not quite expecting. It can go a long way, trust me, guys. So that's how we'll leave it there. Jim, do you want to, just before we head off, do you want to just give people a bit of an insight into what your podcast with John's going to be about, so they can know what they're listening for in the next 2 weeks?
Sure, yeah. I believe the first question I asked John is something about his definition of success. And then the conversation kind of just... I don't even know how to describe it. The conversation just flows wonderfully until like 40-50 minutes we don't even usually you want like some background from the guest, but we don't even discuss like John's occupation until then. And I think one of the main things I took from the interview was how we can really do ourselves a disservice by judging someone based on occupation or based on immediate information that we find about this person, and that a big antidote to many of the smaller issues we have now could be to just be open for a conversation with someone that you may not have previously assumed that would go well.
Brilliant. Well, there you have it, guys. So that'll be released in 2 weeks' time, and that will be titled All Fur Coat and No Knickers. So make sure you listen to that one. We hope you've enjoyed this one, and maybe if we're feeling generous, we might release a bonus podcast in between, but we don't know quite yet. So just keep your eyes peeled.
We'll keep you on your toes.
Exactly, that's it. We're milking you for every single listen we can get. But until next time, guys, thanks a million. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for tuning in. Like we said, keep on sending us those messages. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, send a review, send a 5-star rating over on Apple and wherever else you're listening to. It really helps the podcast get suggested to other listeners, podcast listeners, by Apple and the other platforms. It helps us get our word out there. So do all of that. It takes you 3 seconds, and we will be eternally grateful. But until next time, guys, have a good one.